Tēnā koutou. Good morning, everyone. Well, just as a reminder, we are recording this meeting, so that recording has started. We'll open with a council prayer. I could ask you to bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we ask for wisdom, discernment, and your favour as we deliberate on the business of council. Bless our meeting as we work together to improve the lives of the people we serve. We meet to improve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen. Right, councillors. I do have one apology for lateness this morning from Councillor Kerry Sutherland. Can I just get somebody to move that we accept that? Councillor Chase, seconded Councillor Johns. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And do we have anyone here for public forum? No. Notification of items not on the agenda? There are none. Right, declarations of conflicts of interest in relation to today's meeting. There are none. Moving on to the confirmation of minutes, we have those on page 3. Before I go through them, can I have a mover and a seconder that they're true and correct? Thank you. So I've got Councillor Johns, seconded Councillor Long. All those in favour, please say aye. Let's run through those. Page 3. 5. Just note on page 5, the report coming just around the number of applications for rates rebates and how they're tracking. So we just look forward to that update. Management report, item 7.1. So the recommendation there is from the finance manager concerning the management report, it be received and the contents noted. So if I can have a mover and seconder, and then we'll start discussing that. Moved Councillor Wards, seconded Councillor Wallace. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Right, Sarah, over to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and staff within the room here today. Thank you for having me. First up is our management report on the agenda today, and the first item I want to just touch on is item number 3 in the report, the delay with the first quarter. We've given quite an explanation as to what's happened and understand that we would ordinarily be presenting this at any other time. So is there any questions out of what's already in the report that you guys have that I can provide any answers to?
The next section in the report is on external funding. Matt.
Apologies. Next section in the report is on external funding. Max is our project accountant and she is in here helping us. She's taking care of all things externally funded for us, which is absolutely amazing. So I'm going to just, without further ado, hand it over to her to cover off her section. I'm sure she'll take questions once she's done a bit of an explanation.
Welcome, Max.
Okay. So I've split the external funding into basically Cyclone Gabrielle recovery and other funding. So perhaps I just talk a little bit about the Cyclone Gabrielle funding. So that has been significant. I guess the greatest chunk really has been from Waka Kotahi for roading, and I guess works are progressing in that space. The other two, on the top one, we've got an amount of 450,000 from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and we also have below that 500,000 from the Deep from the department in her life. So the top tranche of funding, that is 450,000. We haven't actually tapped into that yet. We are actually eligible under that agreement for another 450,000 if required. The reason we haven't tapped into that is that we received the DIA funding of 500,000. Sorry, lots of thousands going on here. And that we were able to claim costs for recovery that had been incurred in like immediately after the cyclone. Those costs were basically a contract recovery manager and contract communications. And we're also able to claim staff costs that were working in the recovery space afterwards, and also the setting up of the recovery office. I guess that the $500,000 fund had a much broader ability. It was less prescriptive, I guess, in terms of being able to claim. So we made the decision to basically focus on using up that funding first, and then we would look at the second tranche of the 450 provided by. I guess the other thing to note is that we received the $1 million from MPI, and so as part of that funding, they said, well, that funding agreement allowed us to kind of make a reduction in staff to the other funding. So we're actually able to push all of that funding out into the community. There are a few smaller ones in there, lottery grants, etc., and those are kind of reasonably straightforward tranches. On Cyclone Gabrielle.
Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for that, Max. I mean, it appears like we're wallowing in all this money at the moment, but I imagine there are some caveats with it. The question that I have regarding the other funding table that you've put there, we've got two there that are highlighted as from the Better Off first tranche of funding. What are the risks around us not, and what's the timeline? Because I understand we're still trying to look for a project manager to get these things off the ground. So is there a timeline on which we have to have spent that money, or can?
I think from memory that's a 2-year, that's a 2-year program, and if we were having difficulty in spending it, it seems to me they're very amenable to extensions if required. I mean, I think they understand that it's difficult to get staff, contractors and things like that these days. So I don't think I know that there's an agreement in place for the top one, the building the iwi capacity, and the future communities. That work has started. So I think we'll be okay.
And just a further question, even though we've made the claim for this money, is the money in the bank? So I know Wairoa had a bit of an issue, didn't they? Where
I'm going to say I believe so. That's yeah.
Raj.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Just to add on to what Max talked about, currently they're better off funding a revenue para 4.5. Councillor Watts, it's currently being managed in the absence. We are looking to bring in project management support, but currently it's being led by Mike Dunn of the PMO. So he's driving the project currently now. So we're making some good progress in terms of the two key areas in building EV capacity. And I think we have signed agreements with our two EV partners, and we're progressing quite well with the digitization project in terms of the Better Off funding as well. So making some progress and headway in that space. And in terms of the Better Off funding, and I think it was 10%, the initial down payment that we got, a payment in advance. So that's been used to offset the current costs that we incurred. And I don't think we have consumed all of that because we're still in the early phases of getting the various projects under the Better Off funding up and running. And Max is right. We've got 2 years to have these projects done, completed.
So we did skip a little bit ahead there. Have you got, Councillor Gilmore, have you got questions just around the Cyclone Gabrielle, that side of the funding?
Thanks, Ms. Tracy. Yeah, just jumping back to the DPNC funding, the 450 grand, just wondering, are we at any risk of losing that funding if we don't spend it? So completely appreciate we're using the 500,000 DIA. If there's the 2 tranches of the 450,000 and we haven't used it, are we at any risk of losing it?
So the DPMC funding, that funding runs from the 1st of July 2023 to the 30th of June 2024. Obviously, if we didn't spend it or hadn't spent it all, we would have to return it. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that. I guess it's looking at the risk of that. So is it likely that we won't need to dip that much into that 450,000? So just looking, we've got 157 grand left of the DIA funding. Has that 450,000 sort of been budgeted for and allocated to be able to use up to the 30th of June?
So I would say that it depends on when the recovery office winds down, timing thereof. So that's really the biggest variable, I guess, with that funding. And I don't know the answer to that at this point, but obviously if the recovery office was wound down and staffing decreased, then it's possible that we would need to return some of that funding. Yeah.
Councillor Wallace and Councillor Johns.
Through you, me, Tracy, you made the comment that the actual running of this, or the work that you people are doing, you said you were going to wear that and put it on us. But the operational cost of doing this funding, that was your comment during your
I think the comment, and I think it's incredibly smart, what the team have done, is that the cost of that $1 million for the On Track Fund, I believe that's of the On Track Fund, they made the decision to put all of that money into the community. They could have taken staff costs from that, but actually those staff costs are already covered from the recovery money from the DIA, from the 500,000 above. So they've chosen to take it out of that pool, those costs. So there's still been no cost to the ratepayer. Correct. Yeah, there's no cost to the ratepayer. I think what you've done there is it just demonstrates that you're thinking about every transaction and how we can maximise the use of that money. And part of that, part of the challenge of perhaps potentially losing some money is actually probably part of some of our success for gaining the funds that we need for a good recovery. Yeah. Councillor Johns.
The recovery and resilience funding, what does resilience cover? I know when you're putting in generating things like that, but does it expand beyond that? For instance, we buy a 15-ton digger and have it parked somewhere, or 3 of them.
We don't have a plan for a 15-ton digger yet. I guess I put resilience in there because some of what we've had funding for is like the DigiSpaces trailer, which actually, if there is another event or something where council needed to be involved with, we could take that trailer out and it could become like a base for communications or a hub for a community if they needed it or whatever. So that, I guess that was my thinking in resilience funding. But obviously the rural communities funding of the 250,000 to support the hubs, the mobile generators, and I see there's actually also not included there but happened later, some funding for solar panels. Yes, so that was really my thought of using the word resilience. So, oh, and the roading, of course, yeah.
We'll take your creativity on board. Max, back to you. Did you want to talk about, I did note in 4.2 that the criteria and the way that is broken down for that fund was set by NEMA. That was the comment that I made on my notes. Criteria.
That's correct. Yes, that was set by in the agreement. So that's what they would like it spent on.
We move on to that DIA recovery, 500,000. How often do you sit down with the team and look at those opportunities, noting that, you know, it hasn't been touched and we've got until June next year. So are they looking at other possibilities? Because I do note we've got, 157,000 remaining in the DIA. Do you do that with the recovery team, Max?
Yes, I do. I was actually just speaking to Don last week or so about the untapped 450,000 and basically asking what the plans are and trying to facilitate where possible who we might go and talk to if we needed to, to move on the availability of that funding.
Got a very wide criteria on that one.
The 450,000.
500.
Oh, the 500 is very broad.
That's why we've tapped into that one first. Basically, the wording says recovery costs.
Sorry, my apologies. I did mean the 450.
Yes, no, 450 is definitely descriptive. So that
is why I guess we need to think about how we use that funding.
Awards.
Thank you, Tracy. It's just occurred to me, Max, that I know of other agencies that are taking a rather long-term view on recovery and trying to negotiate with other government departments around ensuring that we might have the money now, but if we could bank it for a little bit longer and utilise it further down the track. Has there been any of that discussion, or is the agreement so well wrapped up that there wouldn't be any potential? Because, you know, the dilemma we have, as Mayor Tracy's pointing out, is we've potentially got $450 in the bank that we don't rush around and spend it before June. Whereas some agencies, for instance, you know, Rural Support Trust, are taking the view that recovery is a long-term thing for rural communities, and we're still going to need money in the bank 5 years down the track to be able to help our communities. So curious to understand whether there's some negotiation there around.
Look, I think because it's been such a significant event that you know, you can always ask. And I think that you might be a little bit later, the more the likelihood is greater that they will allow me such. Yeah, I think they're all. And the money has already been allocated. So my feeling on that.
Wonder whether it's worth exploring that from the recovery team, Your Worship.
Yeah, I actually think it is because we're talking about 450,000, but it's actually 450 plus 450, and we haven't started the first one. Really pleased how that one's going. I just wonder if, perhaps we do ask Don for a report on plans there and actually start to understand just what is included. Whilst it's more prescriptive, there may be some opportunities there that we haven't explored. I'm not saying Councillor Johns will get his digger, but that certainly does form part of resilience in those smaller communities. Right.
Just to add what Mayor Tracy talked about, if you recall the LTP, one of the things we wanted to bring in front is what we call activity management plans for recovery, because this spans the recovery going to spend into the first 2 years of the LTP. I think it's quite important for us to do that. So part of that process of going through, Dawn, working with Dawn, we'll be able to actually look at how we're going to consume the additional funding that we're going to have for the subsequent years, and also look at how the recovery structure is going to look like post 30th of June next year.
Thanks. We look forward to that, and we will put something in and ask Don for a bit of an update around that. Okay. Next, do you want to cover off the primary industries fund? And I know that Don has shared, there was what I think was it $5.3 million worth of claims, which just shows the level of damage out there on farm. They had that $1 million to disperse, which has been absolutely fantastic. Did you want to make any comment on that?
So the $1 million fund, so obviously fully subscribed, so to speak. So I understand from Mitch that all of the farmers have been notified, and he's received some amazing emails of thanks back to, like, obviously there were people that asked for a lot and we weren't able to give everybody what they wanted, probably much less. But Mitch has had some amazing emails of thanks. And I've also heard from Trudy that I think she'd been to a rural get-together event or something at the weekend, and lots of fantastic positive feedback that we were able to do that for the community. So a big win, I think.
Sorry, Mitch is in the process of organising for payments to go out, so they'll look to be going out in the next week or so from our system into the farmers' hands.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I was talking to Don on Sunday because I had a client ring us about this time frame thing, about the $1 million, and because the client was ringing on behalf of his clients saying about this time frame thing, and Don was actually expressed that they are now working to try and extend that window, because even if they give a digger invoice, you've got to give proof. And because as the person said, if I get a bad week with weather next week and we can't do the jobs, the window's closing of time. So yeah, no, they have got it well in here. Yeah.
Fortunately, those timeframes were set by MPI, and maybe a little bit unrealistic, particularly not taking into account weather events and further rain, and that you only needed a bit more rain and your track was, you didn't have access again. So.
Johns.
Where does Advanced Task Force Green come into this? Are they separate to anything we as a council are doing under recovery, or and how's that funded?
That's totally separate.
So with fencing and tracks, well, not tracks, but fencing and water lines and so on, a lot of that will be Task Force Green, presumably. All of them.
There is, it's through the Ministry for Social Development. They've had some really, really good results, and I think they are looking at extending that again. Because like Councillor Wallace highlighted, you know, the weather and conditions have got to be right. You're still getting vehicles stuck out there every time it rains, so it's pretty hard slog, but I do understand that it will continue. I think the intention with the Mural Fund is to cross-check with the applications that were made to the MPI $1 million fund, make sure everybody has that possibly could apply to that, and then also have it available at the Rural Support Trust Day that's down at the AMP Showgrounds. And then the intention is to ask Raj to bring a paper to council just to go over that. The two set limits are $1,000 per individual or $2,000 a business, because some of those costs coming in from, you know, from red stickered properties and other farmers are quite significant. So we've got some good funds left and the ability to help those that need it, but we don't have that the ability to do that at the moment. So that's the next step, just so we can start working towards tidying that up. But I totally agree, you know, recovery is long, and some councils have completely used their mural funds very quickly. Our decision there was just a little bit slower and wait to see where that need is. So it was good to have those. Thank you. Right. Okay. Did you want to comment on any of the other funding there? Yeah,
Through Mayor Tracy, can I just correct? I just got confirmation that the Better Off funding, the deadline is 2027. So I believe they've extended it for a further year.
Are there any further questions from external funding? Well done, team. All that external funding certainly takes pressure off the ratepayers. So well done on the applications, and looking forward to some of those communities really being assisted in a way that they never have been before, with the hubs and maybe the solar powers and the generators. That'll provide some reassurance to communities that, yeah, are doing it tough. Thanks.
Oh, excuse me. Moving on to section 5, Treasury, 5.1, borrowing headroom, one of my favourite topics. Now your favourite topic too. I think I will change my approach, and rather than, because we talk about this at quite a lot of length and in numerous forums, so maybe I will hand it to you guys for questions and take it that way. We did have a question around what was happening within our neighbouring councils, so that we could just provide, I guess, a little bit of reassurance to our community that we're not alone. We had without naming our neighbouring councils individually, they've come back to us. We have one that has currently exceeded their headroom limits. Another 2 would be looking to exceed the headroom limits in the next year or so, and they're all revisiting their debt limits within their financial strategies, like we are for the upcoming long-term plan. Our Treasury experts, I did put in a little spiel from our Treasury experts around, we do have the ability to apply to become credit rated. And I know a question has come back in, and I'm going to hand that over to Raj to give a bit more context too, because he's our specialist in that field. But from what our Treasury experts have said, it's quite a process to apply to become credit rated, and it has an annual cost of around 50 to 60 grand. So it's making sure that if we do go down this route, it's that the cost benefits outweigh each other, like we would for any other financially prudent decision we would be making. Credit rating before I hand to the floor.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. To you, Mayor Tracy. That's something that I need to do a little bit more work in exploring and fully understanding, I guess, the implications or what's required for us to first apply and maintain consistently the credit rating. And what I understand from LGFA is they've got 3 broad credit ratings: the AA, the AA minus, and then the AA in itself. And each of those categories have got a different, or call it discount, in terms of interest rates. And it ranges from, I guess, 5% to 25% basis point. That means 0.2 discount in terms of the prevailing debt rates that we've got. So a quick back of the envelope calculation would be that if we have $50 million debt and you are the highest rating, you get a discount out of $50 million debt close to about 80 to 100,000. So that looks year on year quite reasonable. But however, if you go down the scale to the lowest of the credit rating, it's only it's only 5 basis points. So you're about 25,000. So we're now looking to say, okay, what is the effort and cost required first to put that in place and maintain it compared to the various categories. So in my conversations with peer councils that have gone down that path, and I think when they looked at this some time ago, that was one of their concerns as well. That means if you strike at the middle range, which is the AA minus, and then if you drop, you still need to maintain that cost in terms of keeping up and doing the work to get credit rated, but your interest savings that you have offsets, not enough to offset the cost. So those are the things I would like to do a bit more work and analyze what the risk is before we go down the path regards to doing the credit rating. And I've reached out also to LGFA as well to seek some guidance in that space.
Thanks, Raj. Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Wards.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks for the explanation on that, Raj. It certainly piqued my interest a bit when I saw it in the papers. Very, very pleased that there's going to be some extra work looking at the cost benefits, because I think, you know, with the 50 to 60,000, there's also going to be pretty significant administration time involved, which will add. Also, just, I guess, if we are looking at that, it's looking at the risks of how we would land and the risks of any potential downgrade. I note in the media there has been some stories of the credit agencies looking at making some significant changes to the credit rated councils. Some of that has to do with holding on to 3 water assets, so making quite a big change. So something that on the face of it could look beneficial, but yeah, definitely needs a lot of work because there could be some significant risks. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Raj.
Thanks, Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I never used to get excited about this topic, but I do get excited now. And the reason I get excited is that when I reflect on my first term sitting around this council, and Councillor Johns used to refer to, you know, Raj's jam jars, that we could decide to do this because Raj's got a jam jar. That I get a sense now, though, that the jam jars are either less in number or the lid is screwed on even tighter. And so or it's not even jam, it's gone to something that is it too nice. And those of us, you know, will be looking at, you know, if I reflect on how we might be managing our own business or our own home budgets, you know, I think this discussion here provides us with an opportunity to reflect. By changing our headroom, we're going to the bank for an extension on our overdraft, effectively. And some of us will sit around and say, well, we've got to get rid of a few assets rather than go to the bank to get an extension on our. So this is a really challenging but very timely introduction as we enter LTP, because, you know, we're all aware we have to make some tough calls, but this tool in our toolkit, and you know, in a response to an email I sent to Raj, he reflected, yes, there are risks. And, you know, I'm looking at Steve wondering where on the risk register. I couldn't remember where this particularly was, whether it's amber, green or red. But, you know, we've sat here in the last few months and reflected on some exciting possibilities for our future. And so, you know, Raj's words to me were, yes, there are risks, but what would be the rewards if we did do something? So I'm sitting here in two minds thinking, as we go through this discussion, have to make a call around our headroom with all of the wisdom that we have in the room. Yeah, I'd hate to be sitting here in 5 or 6 years saying, well, we can't do that because we've got no money. You know, so I'm really looking forward to this debate, and I think we should all be keen to contribute to that, because this particular chunk of our potential future is we've come to quite an important time in our council, and the legacy and the decisions we make here set the legacy for our community in the future. So just putting that out there, trying to relate to what it means for us if we were ratepayers, but also reflecting there might be some big words in here, but it's all about the jam jars that we can all tap into and into the future. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Councillor Wards. And I guess that's why I'd encourage people to really think long term. It's very easy to be reactive and have that short term thinking, but actually we're here for the long term to give effect to that strategy. And one of the reasons that some of the bits, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, Sarah, around when I talk to other councils, you know, we might be surprised where their headroom is as well. We're not alone in this. But I suspect, and you might be able to confirm, Sarah, that again, it is the water and the wastewater for all of those councils that is the really big cost. And when we get further into the paper, I think there's some really good pieces in there. So you concur that's where all the cost drivers are coming for the other councils as well?
Yeah, it's all predominantly Three Waters related. And I think LGFA, we have a quarterly update from them, and the indications that they're providing us that people have been borrowing in the Three Waters space. I think, like everyone, we've anticipated the debt to go off our books over the next few years, and that may or may not happen with the change in government. I know that some of our neighbouring councils, and Raj and I will work extremely closely with them in this space, they are investigating the likes of the infrastructure fund that I think Councillor Sutherland has talked about. And I know National, one of their policies when they went into this election was around the utilisation of that fund and what that sort of looks like. So one of the benefits of being a local government entity is that we have neighbouring councils and we do share information, and we're not alone, which is really reassuring, and we don't reinvent the wheel. I think the annual report, when Beth comes up and talks about that later, there's been changes in the accounting standards that we've had to reflect. And I think us being delayed in our annual report adoption has been the most beneficial for me personally for the amount of work I've had to do, because I've been able to reach out to my peers and rely on them and take what they've done and put our little twist on it, which is what we do every day, I think, in our business. So fortunate, but yeah, unfortunate with Three Waters debt as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sarah, those neighbouring councils that you've spoken to, is it the limits that you mentioned, is it their self-imposed limits or LGFA limits you're talking about?
It's a combination. Some their self-imposed limits are at the max limits that LGFA put in place. If they're not already there, they are moving towards that in their long-term plan.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm quite sure that the new government is well aware of the situation that every council's facing in this area, and there has to be external funding other than rates or council borrowing, direct borrowing, whether it's a FAR rate or some other fund that we can tap into. But I just don't see how we, let alone, and I'm sure a lot of other councils are in exactly the same position, can possibly deal with what we've got in front of us right now, let alone grow, as Councillor Wards talks about. So I don't know that we should get too concerned right now and worry ourselves to death over it. Something has to happen that's beyond our ability to determine.
Thanks, Councillor Johns, and we look forward to the government being announced and hearing a little bit more so we know where we're going. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Matt Tracy. Just apologies if I missed a little, apologies for being a bit late and if I missed a bit of this, but I'm a bit like Councillor Scott. This is pretty close to my heart, this too, all this stuff. But every day of the week, we're reading a bit about this situation across New Zealand. And just yesterday, I was reading, was it Mayor Cadogan, the South Island, was it? And obviously, basically, they're saying we've had it, we're broke, we've got too many people, and we need zillions of dollars for growth. Three Waters growth. And basically, a lot of the councils actually are basically just, and politically quite smart, throwing it right back into the government's lap, saying we are flat broke if we have to do X, Y, Z. And I can understand it, and I sympathise with Peter, but I am wary about whatever new government is in, because it's just shifting costs somewhere. They won't go away. It'll just, and I personally believe that it will be a Horizons regional entity of which we'll have less numbers. We're going to be stuck with this problem for a little while, and I think, and I was just going to ask Raj, I just wondered, and Sarah, whether we, as we're going through this process and the long-term plan, one thing I do know that we need to really be carefully identifying all our costs, capital, APEX, cost and OPEX with Three Waters, because the new government's going to want us to identify this really, really quickly. So I think we need to be, without a lot of trouble, keep that in mind. But a lot of work to try and do 2 long-term plans. We've talked about that and given that away, but I don't want to jump ahead in the report, but the headroom, I'm sympathetic and I'm right with you with all this shifting the headroom, but the worrying concern to me, right in behind this, the huge bubble of more concern to me is the OPEX. And we'll no doubt have that soon, that conversation, but that's a massive big bubble that's just pushing behind it, isn't it? The increased cost plus the debt servicing costs. But we are not alone for sure. But, just a comment more than any great. But I have been thinking about the infrastructure fund, which has been very narrowly based till now, not used, but it could be something a new government could put some grunt into, couldn't it? And then, but they also have the concerns, also have the worries about getting their debt ratings downgraded, and then up will go their interest rates, and that'll flow through to LGFA and us. So there's a bit of a high level that could affect us greatly too, isn't it? Yeah, that's my starting though.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland, and I think there is a special general meeting coming up from Local Government New Zealand on the future of local government and what we take together around what we're looking for. Funding and finance was the group that both Councillor Gilmore and myself sat in. It is the most critical one. Everybody is aware of it, and I think as the National Party has indicated with the city deals, part of that will be front footing, how we work together, perhaps on Three Waters. So though there's a lot riding on the announcement of the government and a lot of wheels turning at the moment, but it is very, very complex. And some of those costs worry me that were given to DIA because they're as well. So, yeah, thank you. Passionate about water and waste and finance, very quick.
Okay, moving on to the next section within the report is our deep dive sort of sessions. When we met to discuss the agenda items, Mayor Tracy had a really cool fund saying, let's do 5 funds. I wasn't able to prepare 5 funds, but I've given you 5 fun facts about funds. Make finance fun. We're all about the fun, as you can tell today. So I've gone into a bit of a deep dive, and we mentioned the general purpose reserve in the extraordinary council meeting on the 31st for the Dannevirke impound supply. So I've given a bit of a breakdown of what the purpose of the reserve is, what its balance was at 30 June. And then I've done some digging into the 2 funds within the general purpose fund that we've isolated ourselves or separated from just the pool, the pot, the jam jar, I guess we are saying. So one of them is funds for Woodville. These funds came about. I had quite a good conversation with Peter Wimsett on this and did some deep diving. The funds came about by a piece of land that was endowed to council for the benefit of the people of Woodville. There is caveats around how and what it can be spent on, but obviously needs to be spent within Woodville. I think Raj has some more comments on that. I think, is it asset based that it needs to be spent, Raj? Am I right there? Yeah. And I know that we've used some of this fund to do the feasibility study around the Lindale Walkway. I think that was taken out maybe 2 years ago off the top of my head. And then the other general purpose fund that we have there is funds that we received from Infracon when that company was wound up. I went into the archives, as you can see, January 2016, and found in a staff report that was in the minutes that we've indicated that the intent of this funds was to be used for long-term debt. Conversation with Mayor Tracy yesterday thinks that councillors of the day might have differing takes on that, and it might just be that it wasn't minuted. So keen to hear what those comments were from that time.
Thanks, Sarah. And I recall the comment at the time, and I wasn't sure, Councillor Johns, you might be able to help here, but I'm quite sure that there were comments from councillors around actually that was from roading and it should go back into roading. So that was just the query that I placed with Sarah, and obviously, you know, that is sitting there, and there hasn't been a decision about, you know, where that goes. So that was something that I flagged with her. So I'm not sure if you can recall similar, Councillor Johns, or that's fine. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy, and thanks very much for the report. It's great to be able to sort of dig into some of the detail. Finance is always fun, but this just makes it that little bit more fun. A couple of just very quick questions on the particularly the Woodville and the Infracon funds. Obviously, they'll be invested, that money. So the interest that's earned, does that just go straight back into that pot? Great. I just see that mentioned in that particular part. The other part, looking at what we use it for, I mean, you know, it's a significant amount of money sitting in there that potentially isn't doing the residents of Woodville much good, just sitting into a bank account. Is it time that we actually start planning what we could use that funding for to benefit the town of Woodville, particularly with us projecting some growth in that area? But perhaps that's just more of an open question of, do we actually need to start giving some consideration to those two funds and seeing if we can allocate them wisely?
The fund has come up at various times, so obviously it's one that could be utilised around a skate park or an asset like that, but they just really haven't got the traction within the community to have agreed to that, and obviously it would be in consultation with their communities as well. Yeah, but no, it has always been there. But I think what happens is it sits there, and new people come on to different committees, and actually they don't understand that it is there. So that's where I think this deep dive has been really good. I'll go Councillor Johns, Councillor Wards, Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yes, as far as the skate parks are concerned, that has been discussed. That is on the table. Positively, Woodville is up and running now, and there is cohesion there. There's been a hiccup lately with regard to the pump track that was to be paid for by Waka Kotahi, and within that would be the skate bowl that this fund would be used for, or some of it. And that's sort of where things are lying. But until such time as we know what's happening with the pump track, it's pretty much on hold, I guess.
And it certainly wouldn't use all of that fund either, because I know there is the council's recreation fund, which the other towns have applied to for their skate parks, and I think Waireka Trust has already committed, a further funding for that. So I don't think it would certainly use all of the fund up by any means, but it's certainly a huge opportunity for, for the right thing for Woodville. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. It's kind of, because this is quite a big jam jar in my view. And given that we don't rate for it, across the years, how often would that jam jar get topped up, or has it been fairly static? Because there's obviously only 1, 2, 3, 4 ways we could get more money into that jar, Raj. So we're either selling assets or we're not, grabbing it out of insurance or getting some money out of forestry. So how is it a set level pretty much, or?
Through your worship, council has not put funds into this since I went digging in 2016. We've not sold pieces of land, or the land that we have sold has been offset by the costs incurred to purchase the land. What is hitting this general purpose fund is the interest received on it year on year.
That's the only thing that's topping it up. Wow, it's a long time.
So, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, me Tracy. I'm just looking at the Woodville job. It would certainly make the Southern Ward contestants look good if they, like the other week we were sitting in here and those poor guys in Woodville couldn't get a soccer park going. I'm not saying blow it all, but certainly if there's money there and you can get some cohesion in your end of the country, certainly the comment was made, why have it sitting in the bank? There's going to be young kids today that could be playing on a nice paddock with toilets and bits and pieces. Just an idea. I mean, I didn't even know it existed. So really good work, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Gilmore, and I'm sure you've got this in your locked in your sight.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Just quickly in response to Councillor Wallace's comment, although I 100% agree with the crux, there is a good football field that does have toilets that is there, but there is certainly what you're talking about of actually using it for the benefit of the people of Woodville or kids is absolutely something that I endorse. But the football field is a good football field, but sure, we perhaps.
Well, the soccer field, somebody mentioned something.
Yep, so the soccer field.
They come down here and talk about
They did. That's about fees and other pieces, which we have separate conversations about.
I think the Woodville Fund is an example where they have used long-term thinking. It would have been really easy to go and find a project and rush out and spend that money, but actually they have given it a bit of time. And I guess it's wonderful to see the town of Woodville growing the new highway and actually having a fund like this that actually might be able to build and develop something. So it is really good. Yeah. My question, Sarah, the general purpose fund, the 970,000. Is that the fund that any purchase of land would be required from around the impounded supply? Yep. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Councillor Sutherland.
Just a comment on Infracon money, Mayor Tracy, so it was you mentioned roads, but the years prior to Infracon being sold or wound up really had little or no dividends to us. From memory, we had low dividends or no dividends, and you might say that fund's been that we didn't receive dividends to the council as a whole, and I think we could probably use that for whatever we liked really, if that fund, and it just might be the time to need it could be now really. That's yes.
Comment and then.
I think the fund, just going to put a caveat there. It is from sale of the dividends that we receive for Infracon is revenue that we receive and is offset. So it's not put into this reserves. similar to, because there's a revenue as part of us holding on to the shares. The shares are the assets. So this Infracon fund is actually the shares, which is the capital, because once it went into liquidation, Central Hawke's Bay and us actually returned back what they call a capital investment that went, of course, just capital. So the only caveat that we have is any item that we want to use the expenditure for should be capital in nature. And I think that's why at that time when the recommendation from staff was that let's put it towards debt repayment, because the capital to a capital, and it was parked. And I do vaguely, and Mayor Tracy could be right, I do vaguely remember the discussions was about, there wasn't an agreement as to what we're going to use that fund for. There was some discussions about whether there was a roading element that we could use this for, and that's why this fund just sat there and it's not being used. We can use that fund. It doesn't have to be specifically for roading, but the only caveat is that it needs to be for a capital spend.
Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. And I certainly had a note down there for myself around the ability to use that money as indicated in the report to pay down debt. I mean, you know, we've just had a discussion about our debt headroom. It's something that concerns me personally, and I know concerns a lot of members in the community. As we went through the annual plan, it was discussed at great length. If we have almost, and probably actually now looking at that figure, it would be at 700,000 with the next interest payment. I think that instead of leaving it in an account, we should seriously consider popping it into our long-term debt. I mean, it's money that's come from an infrastructure purpose. Rightly, most of our debt is in the infrastructure space, as it should be. Well, and rightly. So that is something I would like us to seriously consider, getting that put in there relatively quickly.
Thanks. I'll just go to Raj for a comment.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I agree. And the approach Councillor Gilmore talked about, that it go towards debt, but I think offer another proposal would be that as we pull together the LTP, we are going to identify projects that are going to be capital funded, like in the past. So we can target those projects and say those projects will be funded from these funds rather than generically. So I think that's in terms of us in the LTP and having the conversation with the community and how effectively we use. I think that's a much better message to the community about how we are using these funds that we got for Infracon, sale of shares in Infracon towards projects that the community would benefit from. So I think that's a really good story for us, how we align those two.
Thanks. I don't have any issue with that approach, but I guess just so that residents understand where those funds have gone, if we do that, whether it goes through in a report to either council or the finance committee once those have been made. Is that possible?
Through Mayor Tracy, it'll go through the LTP process. So that's your process and how you identify the projects that you want to use this funding for. And then because it's an LTP, it'll be included in the LTP document. If we want to, we could inform in the consultation document as to inform. So there's manner in which how you could use that process to determine how you allocate those funds and how you engage with the community.
That's fine. Thank you. That'll give that transparency. I'll go Councillor Johns, Councillor Long.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. A question. The sale of the Infracon building is not included in the Infracon funds here. Is that in the general purpose fund? When we sold that building, it was,
Yes.
what was that, about 250 or something, wasn't it?
It's 250 rounds.
Gift, wasn't it?
If by gift you mean it went through the correct tendering process, then yes, that is what it was.
Sold at a time where nobody wanted it, and we did try very hard to get Waka Kotahi and others to, yeah. But as the world changed, that was a very good purchase. Councillor Long.
Mayor Tracy, Raj, so that will be itemised in the long-term plan that will be seen for the general public to see. Yep, good, thank you. Thank you. Good.
Right, thanks, Sarah. If we move into the Heritage Reserve, if we can.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy's Heritage Protection Reserve. I have referenced in the report to the policy dated the 10th of December 2003. I have sought clarification and I will circulate the policy once I've got that clarification back from the team. The Protection Reserve policy is pretty details what can and can't be used for. Operational costs, big no-no, as we would expect from something like this. And I hadn't realised, but there was a caveat on it that the entity applying for use of the funds must put a 50% contribution, which if I put myself back into my position as chairperson for a non-profit organisation, we have to make a contribution. So I really support that part of the policy. I've given us the reserve balance. We do rate $10,000 annually for this reserve. And I've given you a breakdown of what has come out of this reserve since 2016. I do want to just, as you'll look at it and you'll ask some questions like I have, one being the Bush Multi-Sport design of light pole at the complex. I think this has come out of the incorrect reserve and I will do some adjustments in the upcoming financial year to rectify it. It's just an internal transaction that we sort of do. We're just going to move from A to B. I've gone off what we've previously put in the agendas and the detail that have gone into the agendas. I've tried to be quite transparent in what's gone on there. Is there any questions on the Heritage Reserve before we?
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. More of a general question. Note that you talk about the policy. This actually goes for the recreation policy as well. If we are rating for them, I guess it's making sure that people know about them and are aware of them, and note that neither of those policies sit on our website. So they are fairly old, and so I can certainly understand that. But I guess as a request of anything that's sort of a contestable fund or that people can apply to, making sure that we have some, and it's not necessarily a finance part, but a general thing of making sure that we have that transparency on our website.
Sarah.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, I just want to add a little comment to that. I've been working with Adele within her long-term plan budget space, and this is something she's extremely hot on and does want all of this information out. So it might not be there now, but we're working on it and we'll get it up as soon as we can. Yeah.
Franklin.
Thank you, Your Worship. This might not be the right place to raise this, but I had to look at the figure that was spent on the replica Sedcoal flagpole. At the weekend at the Armistice Parade, it proved beyond doubt that it has been poorly constructed, and I had quite a long chat with Nigel about it. Nothing's been done about it. It's not fit for purpose. We had a massive issue getting the flag up for the Armistice Day, and we had a massive issue getting it down. It actually has been put in 180 degrees in the wrong direction. So as a council, this is money that has come from ratepayers to pay for this. What is the policy around warranties and guarantees of workmanship and the like?
What we'll probably do, and I did flag this also, sorry for the pun. I did raise this at the finance team and raise that issue of the challenge. So we'll take it on board and go back. Hamish, if you could go through to the Alliance and see what we can do in that space. The other part that stood out to me is around the 50% contribution. And just making sure that we adhere to that policy. But I also did wonder whether it was a little bit of a time for a review, because those policies are very, very old. So once they're circulated, we can have a look and make that recommendation. Thanks, Councillor Franklin, because yeah, I know the pain that has caused. So. Right. Was there any further questions, or did you want to cover anything off on the recreational fund? no further questions in that recreational fund, we'll get those through Adele. Yeah, sorry, councillor Peter Weber. Apologies.
I just did New Zealand Pacific. I didn't. Yeah.
The New Zealand Pacific Studio is an arts in every form studio that is just beyond Pukaha Mount Bruce. They have people from around New Zealand. That particular one was specific to Tararua artists. Just in the way that organisations do change, the artists would go in and live in that residence. They're now moving with the times, and they have sold that house, that historic house, and they now still work with artists of all forms around. It could be writing, dancing. I had sort of hoped that some of our artists it can even be used for going away as a group and working on waiata and things like that. So that's what that was. And then every year the artist has a showcase. So you might recall the piece of art that's in my office with the pendants for women's suffrage. That is a piece of art from the New Pacific Studio Fellowship. So different artists every year. We can follow up because the last I knew is that particular art, that one of those had not been used. It still gets advertised as Tararua. So go Councillor Wallace, and sorry, it was a presentation made by the studio to an annual plan process some years ago. So if I go Councillor Wallace, Councillor Peter Weber, Councillor Wards.
Just a question really, Mayor Tracy. The flagpole, was that in the Poatua upgrade? Street upgrade, was that all part of that deal?
It was agreed to be replaced during the Pahiatua town upgrade because it became dangerous, the original flagpole, and it needed to be taken down for health and safety. Because it is a memorial itself, it was agreed with council at the time that it would be restored as part of the town upgrade.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess that was where I just sort of thought, about the 50% funding. When I looked there, that was the one that didn't meet that with Explore Pahiatua. So that's why I was sort of asking that question. Councillor Peter Weber.
Arts and recreation. What's arts got to do with the recreation fund? I'd probably want to see the criteria.
So I guess that'll come when that policy's circulated. You can have a look, but if arts doesn't fit into recreation and music and everything else, where do they fit? But remembering, councillors, this is a decision. These decisions were made in 19 and 21. So
I thought that created communities that would want there for that fund.
Possibly.
History is sort of have been lumped together.
We'll have it with. Yeah, and I guess that is so. And if it didn't fit that policy back then yeah. So once we get that policy, we can have a look at it a little bit further. Councillor Wallace and Councillor Wards.
Yeah, sorry, I just need to get this poll out of my head. So you're saying we 100% funded that? Right, that makes sense. I think it's a damn dear poll. 54K, I can do a better deal.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Wards.
I think this discussion at the moment, Mayor Tracy, thank you, is a very valuable one, and I'm very grateful that, because these are different jam jars, and there's some jam jars still. I mean, I know you've picked 3, but I think the overlaps between those of us who sit on community boards and have to help make decisions around grants. There's a heap of these things that if it was all rationalised and the criteria were a lot clearer, especially since we are rating for it, I'd feel a lot more comfortable hand on heart to be able to say, look, you're getting rated for this. It might be, in a very fine line in one of your invoices, but we need to clear up where it's going and why it's going. I mean, it'll be new Tracy that will set the agenda for the next one, but I'd love to see a deep dive in where those community boards and committees.
It's already underway, councillor Wards. And I guess it sort of came to the fore, and look, it is around criteria, but it's also around accountability and making sure that those funds are spent where they say that they are spent. And I think it's further on in this report, you know, it's something like $250,000 that we hand out in grants and that, but actually do the people in these communities know, you know, that this is what the Dannevirke Community Board gets, this is what Explore Pakeatua gets, these are opportunities, because sometimes it's seen as we don't support our communities and provide that, and yet we do. And we only report through the minutes, you know, of 4 of those, but actually I know that we do give some smaller support to Pongaroa and also to Norsewood. So just understanding all of that, I think is helpful. Councillor Gilmore. So we're absolutely working on bringing that.
It's good to Tracy, and that's very exciting to hear as well. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. When we talk about, I guess, the things that we're doing and the things that we're handing out, I just sort of want to reiterate that promotion and transparency piece even more, because it really did strike me as how few applications are getting made. I mean, you know, 2021 being the last one for the Recreation Reserve Fund. Really making sure we've got that criteria there, really making sure that people know about it, and that good projects for the community are supported as they're rated for. So I just really want to emphasize that part. It's very important.
Yes, Councillor Gilmore, and I guess, you know, with those, they are big, they all go through council minutes so that they're transparent, and it does take some years to get some of these bigger projects together. So I know the Dannevirke Skate Park, they'll certainly be looking to make application, I'm sure, to this fund as well. So. Right, now you're going to get on to one of my
Worship. Right, section 7 is a deep dive section around the operational costs in our water scheme, and then section 8 follows straight on, being a deep dive into the wastewater scheme. I want to put a little bit of a caveat on this piece of information that you've got. I've given you actually I'll come back. How this piece of work came to be was we've been asked to be able to prepare a piece of work on what the compliance costs increases are to our community. And Raj and I have talked at length about how best we could go about getting this information out there. The compliance and regulations that are put on us, or the changes, don't get isolated out of every other cost. So to be able to do the piece of work I wasn't going to be able to give you one line that I could just go, this is what it is. So we've come up with the solution that we give you the full breakdown of each water scheme as has been budgeted in actuals that have gone against it for the 2022 and 2023 financial year and the 2024 year to date and budget. The reason for doing this is so that you could see the increase in costs across the board. I just want to say, as part of the budgeting process that we're doing through the long-term plan, Roger and his team are working to set the budgets how they would like them. So these budgets in here are inherited from predecessors, and as we kind of have a change in manager within the waters team and across all departments, to be fair, the budgets sort of change with the managers as to how they like to have it set up. So just because there might not be a line or something within each of the water schemes doesn't mean those costs aren't being incurred. It just means we haven't isolated and separated them out from anything else that's in there. So, because I know there are some questions as to why one has water quality testing and why one doesn't. I just want to reassure you they're all captured. It's just the management of the day that budgeted that way and how they've chosen to code those expenses. Those expenses are incurred for all schemes, just wanting to make sure that just because it's not an isolated line doesn't mean. So it's quite I've asked Roger and Hamish to be here just in case there's something that crops up and I don't know the explanation because I am by no means any expert in any costs associated with the water treatment. I just report on how they're tracking. It's quite detailed and you can quite clearly see within the actuals from the prior year to the budget for the 24 year where we're seeing the increase in compliance come across. Roger has let me know that the increase in contract treatment that we're incurring is there's been a significant increase in the cost of the treatment chemicals across the whole country. So that's why there's a significant increase in there, as well as change in chemicals required with the upgrades in the treatment plants. I do want to touch on Paeatua just in isolation for the water, just because it does stick out like a sore thumb. So, Paeatua water treatment plant, the maintenance extraordinary does stick out like a sore thumb, as I've mentioned. That's because we've budgeted to do some ongoing maintenance within the 23-24 financial year. I'm not going to, I'll ask Roger to comment if I'm incorrect, but I wouldn't imagine we would retain a $50,000 budget year on year. We would look to schedule the maintenance program over the life of the long-term plan. Roger, you would schedule, am I on the money making that assumption?
Your Worship, councillors, thanks, Sarah. I think the key issue with Paeatua is the challenges we've been facing with the membranes. So there's significant additional costs that we've incurred, and we've just used another chemical or a new chemical to try and clean those membranes and to improve their performance. So on the basis that we get on top of these challenges with that particular plant, we shouldn't have such a high maintenance cost consistently. But we are, as I think a number of the councillors know, there's some issues that need to be addressed with that particular plant that we're working through with the supplier.
Councillor Wards, Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Tracy. My back of the envelope stuff is working out very quickly what the additional cost from year to year is. And so, you know, those figures are pretty obvious. We've got 200, we've got 30,000, we've got 100,000. The question I have though, so that all adds up to a significant percentage increase. The figures that you've given us for Dannevirke, the difference between the budgets is effectively 100,000 from 87 to 182. Does that factor in, Roger, through you, Mayor Tracy, does that factor in changes that we want to make with the, so I'm looking at the figure 22-23 budget versus the 23-24 budget. I mean, there's a difference of 100,000 roughly there, isn't there? Okay, now, obviously you've reflected on what the actuals were, and so that covers that off. But I guess the question I'm asking is, until we know what we're going to do with Dannevirke, so how have you done your projection on this one, Roger? Have you put the ideal scenarios, the impound supplies all sorted, treatment plants are, one or two of them are in place, or have we just based it on the status quo?
I'll cover this one off. This was done before Roger's time. So Chris, John and I sat down and did the Three Waters budgets for the 23-24 annual plan. The budgets were done on the information we had at the day. Yeah.
Just needed that clarification.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Johns.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, it was a 38% increase in operating overall. But if you took out Pahiatua, eliminated that, it's 25% increase.
I think councillors, it's, you know, these are operational costs are increasing, and I think this is, you know, one of the reasons I was keen to get this in here, but both for ourselves, but actually also for our residents to understand, water and wastewater was a large part of the rate increase, and it was, throughout the country. When you have a look at that compliance and monitoring, and I looked at, Eke Tahona alone, just in the operational costs, and I worked out for the number of residents, it was $500 a year, just for that sort of costing. So yeah, really expensive in that space. Councillor Franklin, you had a question before we move on to wastewater?
Just ducking back to Pahiatua, just south of Woodville. The energy budget, that's quite a massive increase. And I look at the year-to-date figure. So is that 5 months? So we're July, August, September. So if you multiply that up, it actually comes up to 144,000 for the year. Why has it gone up that much? Is that just the cost of power?
There have been, through you, Your Worship, there have been some challenges with the charging of power for the Pahiatua site, because there's 2 facilities on the same site, and one bill has been coming through and it hasn't always been coded correctly. So we've corrected that to make sure that the costs are reflected to both the water and the wastewater treatment plant. But that is an issue that we've been dealing with. The Genesis say that we get Genesis has just been sending one bill for the whole Pahiatua site.
Yeah, 2 things, Your Worship, through you. So there's only one ICP then for Pahiatua.
I can't answer that, Steve. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. But for some reason, I wouldn't think there was, but for some reason, Genesis is only giving us one bill.
One account and one ICP. So that's, anyhow, the second thing, I just want some insurance that the 7 million we spent setting this up, and it's 2 years old, going forward, and it's no fault. Well, I don't know whose fault it is. I'm not looking for blame. I'm looking for assurance going forward. The 7 million investment on that plant, which was state of the art, and I think the then Prime Minister opened it, and we all probably like sheep followed and thought, yep, we got it. Well, the council at the time thought they had the best intentions and so forth. Going forward, we've got good insurance that we're not going down the same track.
Councillor Walsh, I'd have to disagree. That plant was very well researched. Pahiatua is one of the most complex waters because it mixes both river and bore. So it is a very sophisticated plant. And yes, there is some challenges with membranes and around, that quality. But the process that we used was good. And I guess you're learning all the time. But each one of these waters, one of the challenges is every single water source has different characteristics and different treatment. It's very, very complex. I take my hat off to the waters team, remembering each one and what they're testing for. And I think possibly too some of the testing, Sarah, is because some require other, individual tests, if I think at Norsewood versus Pahiatua. So the plant certainly is state of the art. And sometimes when you get state of the art, you can see their increased energy costs, which do worry me as well. So I think one of the learnings from that is you look at the overall project and actually do have a look at that electricity. Perhaps in the future we might have to look at solar panels to help offset some of those costs.
I just add further comment to that, Mayor Tracy. The energy costs that were budgeted when the plant went live were significantly more than what we've been budgeting year on year with the plant live. And just to give a compliment to Roger and his team, they're doing an amazing job with their budgets in this upcoming long-term plan, and they're factoring everything in. They're going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So I just want to give you that reassurance that it's happening and it's a work in progress, and Roger and his team are taking full ownership and will be delivering.
That's great. That's good on you.
Thanks, Sarah. We look forward to those. If I just move on to the wastewater scheme quickly, does anyone have any questions around that? Councillor Gilmore?
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks very much, guys, for this report. I've found it really, really helpful for me to be able to understand where some of those costs are. I know that I'm someone who was asking for info to come from extra regulations or the costs that flowed through. So I completely understand the constraints, and I just commend you for looking at different ways of showing that. So thank you. One thing I just wanted to ask here, again on energy, and energy particularly jumped out at me on the wastewater schemes, and where some plants had really significant increases. So Dannyverk in particular, about 40 grand more, and there may be a very good reason for that, but other plants certainly had increases as you'd expect, but they were much less significant. So
Dannyverk wastewater treatment is slightly different to the others in that this budget for the 23-24 year has factored in a DAF unit being live from December or live from 1 January, I believe. We've got 6 months worth of the increase that we would be incurring as a result of running that plant. So I guess don't be surprised when the 24-25 budgets come in and it's doubled again. That's what is the caveat I guess I'm putting on that. That's got a 6-month increase. It's got
Councillor Wallace, Councillor Johns, absolutely.
Yeah, just quickly, Mayor Tracy, how many DAF plants are we putting in the region, please?
Well, we've got a DAF in Pahiatua at the moment. We're putting in a DAF right now, Dannyverk, and we're looking at putting a second DAF into Pahiatua. So instead of having one, having 2 DAFs, so we can run both of them when we've got the high demand, I suppose, for the treatment plant, but then turn off one when we don't need to. So it'll give us greater flexibility.
Thank you. I simply concur with Councillor Gilmore's comments. This is the first time I've seen these sorts of costs, operational costs put out. It's excellent to see. Just one question: the regional council monitoring is about $130,000 per plant. What's involved in monitoring that costs $130,000?
So at the moment, they collect a number of samples on our behalf, and then those samples get processed through a lab. So it's all managed by Horizons. However, Barbara Stevenson, the new compliance manager, is actually looking at withdrawing that from Horizons and us, the council, doing more sampling and utilising CEL, another laboratory. And we think we can actually save quite a bit of money, but also we'll have much more timely results. So we're just working through that at the moment with the intent of having that in place early in the new year. Everything goes into that. So we're not happy with the current situation.
Thanks for that, Roger, and that's really good to hear that you're looking at those different ways, because actually that's more money staying in our economy as well. But that's one of the things I do look at, and the compliance or the consenting requirements on that. You know, they are getting tougher and tougher, and there is a cost to all of this. And the part that worries me, you know, especially around our headroom, is when you look at the dates on those wastewater consents and how close they are together to coming up. They take a very long time to get through the system, and you know they're becoming shorter and shorter, and I'm led to believe that you won't get any longer consent than 10 years, and it's just such a great investment for such a short period of time. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. I was just Pahiatua with the new DAF units there. Their energy costs are going to be 40 grand a year extra as well. So, but just a question, which I suppose is a bit dumb, but I guess, do we go out and procure energy for the whole council under one? Yeah, we do.
We are under the all of government contract, so we do have energy at a cheaper rate than any other person would be able to obtain. So I'd hate to imagine what we would be looking like without an all of government contract.
Just showed my lack of knowledge. I just hope.
Solar panels are switching from
We talked about Peter Vincent earlier, and this is one of his areas that he hones in on. He's all about energy, obviously, for global warming purposes. It enhances his abilities in that space. So he's all over it.
Right, Sarah, if we move into venue utilisation, but thanks for that work. That is really great to understand. Thank you.
Through your worship, we've been talking about venue utilisation as part of our long-term plan sessions and wanting to get it into a public forum, I guess. So putting in as it is a service performance measure, giving you the detail behind it and how it's sort of calculated. This in the 23 annual report just going that the measure was met. So the measure is that utilisation is increased is effectively what the measure is. And you can see through the full breakdown table that we have increased utilisation over the years post-COVID. Is there any questions on it? Would be where I probably would prefer to go if that's all right with you, Beatrice.
This in general for community buildings.
Correct. So if you've got any questions around that, and I guess the comment that when I had a look at, especially around the costs and that, whilst people do say that our fees are high, actually all of them would really run at a loss. They do. If I go Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Wards.
Thanks, Ms. Tracy. And again, thank you very much for this report. This was really handy to dig into. Quite striking. I know we do see figures around utilisation that gets reported through. Having that kind of cross-referenced against the costs was quite compelling reading. One thing that I just wanted to double check on, there is a line item in most which says patrols. Can I just double check that is security, or what specifically is patrols?
Patrols is our after hours service provider. They go around and check the buildings. They check that they've all been locked. They might go ahead and lock gates that we've asked them to. The after hours contract is part of the regulatory after hours contract as well. So it's the one provider does both.
I found it interesting. Some did have patrols and some didn't have patrols. Some of them were fairly high amounts. So I guess I was trying to understand why some might have it. Some might be a coding thing, not 100% sure. But when I calculated it all out just for patrols, 31,450. So quite a significant amount for security, particularly if some buildings don't need it, but some do. So I'm just trying to understand it.
Through your worship, all buildings will have the patrols conducted on them. It's just we haven't broken it down on the invoice, and like you say, it is a coding issue that we will look to rectify. The key piece of this information, I guess, that I spoke to Mayor Tracy about this yesterday, is the after hours regulatory contract to go out to the market and to be attractive for someone to bid for that service and someone who could deliver that service at a high quality. We needed to put in the patrols security as part of it. It's the one provider. So the community facilities, all facilities probably took a larger hit than what they would have had we stuck with the status quo in that. But it was a cost benefit analysis across the whole of council to make sure that we were able to get the services for the regulatory that then followed suit. So it's the one provider does both. If we went out to the market for two separate contracts, you wouldn't get a provider, I don't think. So the cost did increase at that point in time, but the perk of the contract that we have is we can add buildings, we can add additional stops because that staff resource is just allocated to council. So as new buildings come online and things like that have happened, we haven't seen an increase in costs because it's already factored in.
Thanks. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I'm quite keen on digging around in this area because especially when it comes to our revenue and our expenditure, I think we all hand on heart can say we know that rates are subsidising that, and we struggle on our fees and charges to try to find something that's realistic. But this is an area that really does concern me, and I think we have the ability to influence. I'm curious to understand, with my back of the envelope calculations, I was able to demonstrate where we hope the revenue might go, but realistically, where it's going to land. And Raj probably guffawed loudly when he saw my hopeful email that wouldn't it be nice to have it self-funded, because it ain't going to happen, is it? But I think in the bottom line there, so I took your revenue line and I added all that up, and then I took your totals down there. And I mean, overall, you were budgeting less in terms of expenditure, but even less in terms of revenue. So where's going to be the sweet spot? Because we can lump it all together and go, look, this community facilities in general are costing our community. This is what we're able to gain in revenue. Suck it up, ratepayers, because that's the difference. I think in our LTP, the information you and the team have provided here, Sarah, will allow us to actually base any calls we make on this has got to go, or we've got to find a way of releasing this. So I know the decision isn't today, but I really appreciate the analysis here, because it provides us with data to be able to say, yeah, so well done in trying to get it cost neutral, but I don't think that's the way it's going to end up, is it?
Sorry, I'm going to burst your bubble a little bit. The total line is net of revenue.
Oh.
Yeah.
So each community facility there's a rates impact.
Significant.
Actually, I've got each of them recorded down the side of my agenda. Yeah, but look, it does provide some really good background for when Adele does present that in the long-term plan. We've talked to the community, but actually, here's the figures. You know, here's the transparency. This is what it is. So, I do really appreciate this as well. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. I mean, it's rather telling, isn't it, that the insurance cost of the building is 3 times the income.
Yes.
It's good discussion if we just add to it, you know, as part of the LTP level of service discussions, you know, and I think the thing that we need to think about is 2 parts here. One is, what is this activity and why this activity is here in the first place? That'll give you some ideas to why we're providing community buildings. The second element is revenue financing policy, how we're going to fund it. I think in the funding element, we did say that it's leaning more towards a public good element, public element. That's why you have, and that drives, I guess, your thoughts around the fees and charges. And also the pricing strategy, when you talk about it, what's the intent for us into setting the price? We say is utilization. So you've now got to balance the increase in fees and charges. And I think we had these discussions in the annual plan too, to say it's not affordable for small clubs. So keep the fee low. So that's where we need to balance. I think the rationalization would help us to look at this. And the other thing is also fit for purpose. It doesn't mean that you're going to find a reduction in cost. It just means that the building is not fit for purpose. If we decide to make it fit for purpose, that means you may have to make some investments. Then that can correspond, I guess, with an appropriate fee going forward.
Raj, and I think too, when we look at things in isolation, we forget actually that a lot of these are events that bring people into the district and make a great place to be as well. So good data, thank you. Right, Sarah, if we move on to the item 10, the key research benchmarking report. Is there anything you wanted to highlight there?
Not particularly. I'll take questions.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. And if you could just give us the item you're referring to so people can have a look.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. I'm just on page 30. It's just a really, really quick comment to make. The benchmarking I found really helpful. In general, I think that there's some things that councils right across the country have a lot of work to do, and a lot of that is comes down to perception. And so I wanted to highlight the value for money area. So the value for money side at the kind of very bottom of the pack. And the reason why I wanted to mention that is I actually think some of these things that we've been talking about today in this committee helps us to be able to lift that, to be able to get some good explanation so we can go out to our community. So it's really transparently shown where that value is, where money's being spent, or if there isn't value, that we're finding that and we're making decisions as a council. So really that line there for me, and that's why I wanted to highlight it. It really encapsulates the value of some of these deep dives. So thank you again.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. Are there any other questions or comments around the performance? Okay, thank you. It's always good data to understand, and we always strive for continuous improvement. So, future work plan. So we've got what would you like to see further deep dives on? And obviously there's a couple that will come up in the long-term plan that I've discussed with the finance team, and that's around pensioner housing and just having a little bit of a deep dive there, because I don't feel that there is any longer self-funding, just the level of work that we are putting in there. So I've just asked that'll come through the LTP, and again the other community funding that is there. But are there any other deep dives that you'd like to see? So I'll go Councillor Peter Weber and Councillor Wards.
I know this is probably quite a biggie, but we used to see Tara Alliance's budgets, and now don't see them at all. I don't know if things have changed there with Diana, but I know that's quite a huge lot of work. But it's just something I've noted that we haven't seen lately.
I'll pop something and we can see what we can do there. Yep. Councillor Wards and then Councillor Gilmore.
You covered off, I had 2 items, Your Worship. One was the grants through community boards, but forestry. I'd really like to have a bit of a go on that one. Thank you.
Sure, you'll be supported by Councillor Johns. And Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Agree with all of the above, and I'm going to have one final crack at the Costa mandates keeping or the government requirements keeping that up, and perhaps looking at doing that slightly differently. What I don't want to do is cost a huge amount of staff time and effort with it, and I think what you've shown is it would be really significant. I think it's as we're working through some of this budget process, some best guess estimates. So really, as a guess, we see that the budget's increased by this much because inflation, everything's increasing, but actually it's gone up further. How much do we think in that area it's due to extra requirements? So understand it might not be possible to do, but just doing a last attempt to try and get some figures.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. We all feel the pain of those mandates. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just in reply to Erin, we do get a very, very detailed analysis of the Alliance performance, which was last year, which had a couple of layers of checking from, and that must be a sort of is that following the June? Do we normally get those? I mean, I don't know whether they do forward budgeting for those, but we certainly get a very detailed analysis of where we go, because they rely on that for us to give them a bit of a performance payment based, don't they, on the capital? Yeah.
To Mayor Tracy, is right. I wanted to give some context to it. So we report the Trial Alliance, I guess, in 3 places. One is as part of the infrastructure committee, but not so much of a detailed financials, but at an activity performance or work program. We do that as part of a first quarter report. And I think the report that you're referring to is every year we present 2 reports to the council. One is a performance audit that we do in terms of the KRS and KPIs, and we do what we call the annual financial audit. So that's where we do the detail. I think that's what Deputy Mayor referring to, which is the detail analysis, where we get an external independent auditor to audit the financials of the Toro Alliance and to arrive at the pay and gain share element. So I think that level of reporting, I think it's sufficient, and I think with the cyclone recovery, you'll find that added disclosure or added reporting in the quarter report, because there'll be a significant amount that we're tracking and reporting against. So I think having looked at that, I don't think there's any further that we need to report. The Toro Alliance is going through now the financial audit. And I think hopefully the new year will present the full financial report, both the performance audit and the year-end financial audit. So that will be arriving maybe the new year. Not sure whether it's be January. I think it might be in February.
Follow up. I think through you, Trace, to Raj, when we had a formal manager appointed to Alliance that used to attend the infrastructure meetings of the council, Wendy, we did get it on. We used to get a sort of update how we're going, and are we against budget? But with the few changes and a few difficulties at the Alliance, that has stopped, wasn't it? And they've changed their structure a bit, so we don't see an Alliance manager turn up here like we used to, do we? That's altered a little bit. So that may be where we've seen a slight change in relationship between Alliance and ourselves, isn't it? Just a
I believe they attend the infrastructure committee meetings. I think that is the avenue that the Toro Alliance actually present the Toro Alliance activities, including not just the programs, I guess, overall performance against the budgets as well. Andrew and Marcus at some stage, and even Dan.
That's on the actual work being done, isn't it? We haven't gone down to the financials of those matters. So quite true. Yes, thank you.
Did you want to make?
Sorry, through your worship, I just wanted to say the Alliance operational items are covered off in our quarter report. We do it in conjunction with Matt and his team. So we do get the analysis, because I think one of the ones that sticks out like a sore thumb every report is our emergency works. So we're keen to understand what more in that space after.
And I think what I'll do is take that on board. So we do get some reporting. I'll have a look, and I guess have a look at around just how we communicate that to members of the public. And I know that's a very good audit, but just what highlights can we bring out maybe to take everyone on that journey? Because I know that roading's tough. We have a lot of roading. We have, a large amount of dissatisfaction throughout the country right now with roading. So it's a hot topic. So we'll have a little bit of a look at that. But I think if I do that in conjunction, it'd be good to see what's coming up in the quarterly report, and work that out for the next finance meeting. Thanks, Sarah. If we move to item 7.2, there's a recommendation here that the report from the Policy and Planning Advisor dated the 4th of October concerning the 2024 long-term plan be received. So if I can just ask Angela to come to the table, and thank you very, very, very much, Sarah, for your work. That I think mission achieved on making finance fun, and some really good deep dives, and look forward to the next one. So thank you. Welcome, Angela. Can I get somebody move that Angela's report be received? Councillor Franklin, Councillor Chase, all those in favour, please aye. Against, carried. Right, Angela.
Good morning. Is there any questions? Obviously you're involved in the process, but this is the platform to bring an update of the process that we're going through.
I've just made a note, that we'll be working through those financials, and it sounds like the team's done an awful lot of work in that budgeting space. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Does anyone have some questions? And I know we're sort of running on a tight time frame. I noticed in 3.6 we've got the right debate and form items, asset management plans and budgets, and capital and operation budgets. That's a big lot of work for those months, but it sounds like that work has been going on in the background. Yeah. So any Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Ms. Tracy. Just a really quick one. And this is either through you to Angela or to Raj. Are we confident we've got sufficient time to be fully getting through it, being able to fully dig into the financials and everything else we do? Like, are we on track? I just want to double check.
The quick answer is we have to. But Raj, you might like to elaborate as to how that's going to be achieved.
Yes, the team is doing enormous work for it, but I think the comfort. I think the slight difference. I'm going to reflect on two things. Reflect on the annual plan process, and I think that's how, in terms of the annual plan, I think one of the comments was made through the process, and we pushed out the annual plan was that the rates increase was quite high, and I think in the chambers here you felt that they didn't have enough time actually to tension and look at the rates requirement. But this is an LTP, and I think where council can give a good steer for, and I think you have good steer for the managers is through the activity management plans. You've gone through that process, a good steer of that. The financial strategy, the funding envelope, that will be a good steer for us. So I think the work that the ELT and the managers are going to do is using the funding envelope as our first test. So I think for us to come back to you with a rates increase that is not within the financial funding envelope, that the financial strategy would mean that we need to come back to you with options. So that detailed work will be done by us. So I think the level of deep dive, I'm assuming, would not be as required, because the responsibility would be sitting with the ELT to come back to you to say, this is where the budget sits, this is where the funding envelope sits, so the options that we have. So I think a lot of work is going to be done by us. But having said that, it's the timeframes that we have from December is that there is sufficient time for us to go through that deep dive as well, if it's required, if the budgets that's come through with us. Because remember, we've done the bulk of the work in terms of activity management plans, and the next workshop you're going to go through the asset management plans. So what's left for us from now till February next year is just focusing on budgets. So we've got a lot more time actually to look at that.
I suppose just important to flag, we've had some conversations that we might need to be making some big and some tough decisions, and I don't think that we've yet had some of those conversations, and I think that the budgets are going to direct some of those conversations. I just wanted to quickly reflect on heading away to rural and provincial, which Mayor Tracy and I were at recently, speaking to a number of mayors and councillors that were attending, that talking about the first cut of rates requirements that they had already received, and the numbers were scary across the board. If those numbers are scary for us, I think we have some big tough decisions that our community will demand that we make. So I guess it's just me putting it out there that I've said it a few times throughout the process, but I want to be assured that I have enough time to be able to dig into the detail, and that we as a table have enough time to have that debate. So it sounds like we will have, but I just want to make that quite clear.
Did you want to make a comment?
Whatever, run through your worship. Yeah, we've had those sort of similar discussions within ELT, and and the reason why we did provide a lot of information through this is to hopefully try and minimise that. So when we present the AMPs, it was a really good idea, really the best stage to really focus on those levels of service. The caution I would put out there though is that if we go through that and then we're revisiting every level of service again, we are going to be spending a lot more time and a lot more time having to revisit that. So just endorsing what Raj said, ELT will spend a lot of time looking across the budgets and the levels of service, and through those discussion and all that information that did come back through the process. So we understand and that, you know, you're going to be showing a 35% rates increase, that there's no way that's going to land. So, you know, the challenge that we're going to have, maybe compared to some of those other councils that you have spoken with, is that, you know, we run, I think, a pretty lean ship with not a lot of fat there to cut to begin with. So when we start cutting back levels of service, you may not even then get the results that you want. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, the focusing on the budgets, it should be focusing on levels of service during that process, and that makes the setting of those budgets a bit easier.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Brian. And I think, look, we are all looking forward to seeing those budgets, because as we go through levels of service, we've been looking at some of those unconstrained, and you know, this is what we want, but actually there's also what we can afford. So look, that they will be tough conversations. They are some scary figures from others. Yes, I'm really looking forward to that when we get to have a look at it. Yeah, I know everything is tight and we're pretty lean, but we have talked about some hard conversations, and just looking at making, you know, some of those deep dives, you know, into things like pensioner housing. They'll all help inform that.
We did present constraint levels of service, so it wasn't unconstrained from our perspective, but they were certainly, you know, we screwed that and we tightened down, and we didn't present a lot of what we probably should have or wanted to, because we knew of those, so they certainly were constrained.
Sorry, the presentation I was thinking was really around roading. Sorry, I was specifically thinking of one where, you know, yeah. So water tabling, you know, that was really, really important to us, but we didn't look at what that, yeah. So that one was a little bit, this is what we'd love to see, what we can afford. So sorry, I was referring to one budget in my head. Right, thank you very much for that, Angela. If we move on to item 7.2, Raj, you're taking this one. I'm sorry. 7.3, the forestry update. I'll just take the recommendation, the report from the Tauranga Alliance Engineering Services Manager dated 17th of November 2023 concerned the forestry update be received. Can move Councillor Long, seconded Councillor Sutherland. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right. Do you want me to move into questions, take the report as read, Raj, or are there any comments you'd like?
Mayor Tracy, I think quickly it's comforting that we have resolving just getting confirmation from Horizons the abatement notice would be lifted. So it's really good. And I'd like to acknowledge the effort by the team, and also the effort by the contractor in working alongside us and helping resolve, and also Horizons as well. They've been really good in working alongside us in resolving that issue. That's really good. And I think just an update on Birch Knot, so it's quite good for us to progress that further from the last. And I think we're going to commence. I think like what the report says, you know, we're going to start our silviculture work, and we are working with the contractor and looking at the entire, not just Birch Knot, having a program in place to look at the entire forest block in the district and pull together an activity management plan for forestry.
Jones.
Tracy, and thanks, Raj. Just, I mean, I guess we're not going to talk about the future of Birch North or Scarborough here today, but insofar as this report's concerned, the fact that there's no agreement with Forest 360 yet surprises me, given that we've been waiting some months for that to happen. Is there any reason why it's not in place? I see it's currently with Forest 360. How long have they had it to look at?
Yeah, a bit of and I think it's a to and fro between two elements of the program. One is looking at the forestry management plan as one program. The second element was contracting and doing this with the culture work. So we have we have, and I think agreed on both elements of it, and we have secured for the civiculture work both local contractors. So I think from the last understanding with Jess and Paul, I think we are looking to finalize it, and I think in this week or early next week, and then they can commence the civiculture work.
It just seems to drag on and on and on and on and on, and we get the same sort of report each time that something's in the wind and it's going to happen.
May Tracy give you a bit of context to this. I do not have a procurement team. Both staff that are left, we are struggling to find replacement. So the staff who are managing procurement right now for us is Jess Smith, who's by right recently been promoted to manager, and myself. And we've got an external consultant. And I think the priority for us, though we have been working alongside this, and I think there has been in the organization, I guess, significant projects that has taken our time. Denmark Impounded Supply as a whole program of works, solid waste, and I think you recall the report that was presented, the effort that the team is still putting into in finalizing that contract and the change, and also, I guess, supporting the wider organizations in roughly at about 140 procurement capital projects that PMO is delivering. So I think I acknowledge that we haven't progressed this contract and signed to the satisfaction of the councillors, but I think given the priorities in front of us, I think I'm quite pleased that the team is able to progress this alongside all the other projects as well. So I think we've reached a stage where we are in the final few elements of just agreeing on parts of the elements of the contracts. And as was indicated in the report, we are prepared to sign it this week or early next week, and then we can commence the civiculture work.
Sutherland.
Thanks, Tracy. Yes, we've sort of been talking about the forestry, we hadn't heard much for a while, so I'm pleased to see that Forestry 60 we're going to do something. We were looking to get them into a 3-year contract to manage the forest going ahead, weren't we, Raj? That's still the case, but at least we've had some foresters in there doing some work, which I didn't think there was anything left for us to get money out of at the time, and made some money. So, but it was amazing, isn't it? From the last valuation we had said there was nothing left, it was hopeless, and then we found some forestry that we can get a few dollars off. So that's a positive. That's a bit of a return. So I guess, Peter, we'll have a forestry meeting in due course.
I look forward to it.
Okay. Councillor Wallace, last question. I do need to wrap this up because we have audit and risk that is scheduled 11 o'clock and it is 11:01.
I'll make it quick. Are we rationalising our assets and selling the forestry departments?
One simple answer from this paper, no. So that is a much bigger question. Right, okay. Thank you, councillors. That was a really good meeting, and apologies for that going slightly over. I'll close us with a karakia before we start audit and risk. Kia tau te rangimairi e, kia tau te araha, kia tau te whakapono, Māori ora, kia tātou katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai, kia ora.
That's all, appreciate it.
We need to start a little bit later.